Poor girl. Buys baby formula. With her last coins, Hell's Angel said, "Your family now." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the busy supermarket as Megan Sullivan pushed her cart down the narrow aisle. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor, matching the rhythm of Sophie's fussy cries. The shopping basket felt heavy in her arms, loaded with only the bare essentials, diapers and formula that seemed to cost more with each passing week. "Shh, it's okay, sweetie," Megan whispered, reaching into the cart to stroke Sophie's soft blonde hair. The touch calmed her daughter for a moment, but the peace was short-lived. Sophie's face scrunched up again, her cheeks flushed pink with frustration. Megan's heart ached. She knew Sophie was tired. They both were. After working double shifts at the diner and picking up extra cleaning jobs, exhaustion had become her constant companion. The weight of being both mother and provider pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The contents of her small basket weren't much, but they represented everything Sophie needed. Megan paused near the end of the aisle, shifting the basket to one arm while she dug through her purse. Her fingers brushed against loose change and crumpled bills. She counted them again, even though she'd already done so 3 times before leaving home. $27.35. It had to be enough. Sophie's cries grew louder, drawing glances from other shoppers. Megan felt her cheeks burn as she noticed their stares, some sympathetic, others annoyed. She quickened her pace toward the checkout line, gently humming to Sophie in an attempt to soothe her. "It's almost over, baby," she promised, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. The line at the register wasn't long, but each step forward made her stomach twist tighter. She watched as the elderly woman ahead of her finished her transaction, gathering her bags with careful movements that seemed to take forever. Finally, it was their turn. Megan placed her basket on the counter, forcing a smile at the cashier, a young man with kind eyes who gave Sophie a little wave. The beeping of the scanner seemed unusually loud as he rang up each item. Formula, beep, and diapers, beep. Megan's hands shook as she opened her purse again. The total flickered on the display, $31.42. Her heart sank as she counted her money one more time, hoping that somehow the amount would magically increase. But the math didn't change. She was $4.07 short. Heat crept up her neck as she looked at the growing line behind her. A businessman checked his watch impatiently. A mother with 3 kids shifted from foot to foot. The weight of their presence pressed against her back like a physical force. Sophie let out another cry, this one more desperate than before. Megan looked down at her daughter's tear-stained face, feeling completely helpless. Her throat tightened as she reached for the package of diapers. "I'm sorry," she said quietly to the cashier. "I need to put these back." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She'd calculated everything so carefully, but somehow she'd still come up short. The shame of it burned in her chest as she imagined having to stretch the few diapers they had left at home. The line behind her grew longer, and Megan could feel the collective sigh of frustration from the other customers. Sophie continued to cry, as if sensing her mother's distress. Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity as Megan stood there, caught between necessity and insufficiency, her world shrinking to this moment of quiet desperation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Megan felt her cheeks grow hot. The cashier's expression remained professional but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you'll need to remove something from your purchase." Sophie's cries grew louder, drawing more attention from nearby shoppers. Megan's hands trembled as she reached for the pack of diapers. Her throat felt tight, and she could barely swallow past the lump forming there. She'd stretched every dollar as far as it would go this month, picking up extra cleaning jobs whenever she could, but it still wasn't enough. "How much is she short?" The deep, gravelly voice came from behind her. Megan turned around, startled by the interruption. Her eyes traveled upward to meet those of a tall man with a thick beard and short hair. His leather jacket bore the distinct patch of the Hells Angels, and his massive frame seemed to fill the entire checkout aisle. Despite his intimidating appearance, there was something gentle in the way he looked at her and Sophie. The cashier hesitated before answering. It's 12:47, sir." Megan shook her head quickly, embarrassment flooding her face. "No, please, I couldn't. I'll just put these back." She clutched the diapers tighter, as if holding on to her pride. "Nonsense," the man said, his voice softer now as he watched Sophie continuing to fuss. He stepped forward, pulling out his wallet. "Let me help." "But I don't even know you," Megan protested weakly, though her arms ached from holding Sophie and the diapers. The man's weathered face cracked into a slight smile. "Name's Jax. Now you know me." He pulled out a credit card and handed it to the cashier before Megan could object further. The cashier ran the card through quickly, seeming eager to move past the awkward moment. Sophie's cries had subsided to quiet whimpers, and she stared at Jax with wide, curious eyes. "I can't accept," Megan started to say, but Jax held up a hand. "Listen," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes we all need a little help. No strings attached." He signed the receipt and handed it back to the cashier. Megan stood there, frozen in place as the reality of what just happened sank in. This stranger, this intimidating-looking man in a motorcycle club jacket, had just saved her from having to choose between diapers and formula for her baby. Her vision blurred slightly, with tears she refused to let fall. The cashier finished bagging her groceries, and Jax picked them up before Megan could reach for them. He held them out to her with a small nod. "Here you go, ma'am." Their eyes met as Megan accepted the bags, and she saw nothing but kindness in his gaze. No judgment, no pity, just simple human compassion. Her voice barely came out as a whisper when she finally managed to speak. "Thank you." Jax simply nodded, stepping back to let her pass. Megan gathered Sophie in one arm and her groceries in the other, still trying to process what had just happened. As she moved toward the exit, she glanced back one more time at the mysterious man who had shown such unexpected kindness to a struggling stranger and her crying baby. Megan stepped out of the supermarket's automatic doors, her arms full of grocery bags. The evening air felt cool against her flushed cheeks, and Sophie had finally settled down, content to play with the zipper of her little jacket. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm chirped. Heavy footsteps behind her made her grip the bags tighter. She turned to find Jax following her, his leather jacket creaking softly as he walked. Up close, she could see the intricate details of the Hells Angels patches on his jacket, and despite his intimidating size, there was something gentle in the way he carried himself. "Hey!" he called out, his voice softer than before. "Hold up a minute." Megan stopped, shifting the weight of her groceries. Sophie looked up at the big man with curious eyes, and to Megan's surprise, Jax's weathered face broke into a warm smile at her daughter. "Listen," he said, running a hand through his short hair. "I know you probably think this is strange, coming from someone like me." He gestured to his jacket and long beard. "But I meant what I said in there. You're family now." Megan's eyes widened. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." Jax's eyes crinkled at the corners, a hint of sadness crossing his face. Sometimes family isn't about knowing everything about each other. It's about being there when someone needs help. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small business card, worn at the edges. "This has my number on it. You ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me." The card trembled slightly in Megan's hand as she took it. The simple text read, "Jax the Bear Maddox," followed by a phone number. She stared at it, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness from a stranger. "I can't possibly—" She started to protest, But Jax held up a hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "And you never have to hesitate to ask for help. We take care of our own." Sophie chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, reaching toward Jax with her tiny hands. The contrast between her innocent gesture and his rough appearance made Megan's heart twist in an unexpected way. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay. Family doesn't keep score." Jax interrupted gently. He took a step back, giving her space. "You get home safe now. And remember what I said." Megan nodded, clutching the grocery bags and the business card as she walked to her car. The card felt warm in her palm, like a small beacon of hope. As she loaded the groceries into her trunk, she found herself glancing back at the store entrance, but Jax had already disappeared into the night. She settled Sophie into her car seat, her movements automatic, while her mind tried to process what had just happened. The words, "Your family now," echoed in her thoughts, bringing an unexpected comfort. For someone who had been carrying the weight of her struggles alone for so long, those simple words felt like a lifeline thrown into deep water. As she sat in the driver's seat, she carefully placed Jax's card in her wallet. Despite her usual wariness of strangers, something about his gruff sincerity had touched her heart. For the first time in months, she felt a little less alone in the world. Megan sat in her old Honda, hands gripping the steering wheel, as she watched the empty parking space where Jax's motorcycle had been minutes ago. The rumble of his engine had long faded into the night, but his words echoed in her mind. "Your family now." Sophie cooed softly in her car seat, playing with a small stuffed rabbit, completely unaware of the strange encounter that had just changed their evening. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars scattered under the flickering lights. Megan's thoughts wandered to the mysterious man who'd helped her. His leather jacket and Hell's Angels patches should have scared her, but there was something in his eyes, a kindness that seemed genuine, almost familiar, like he understood what it meant to struggle. She reached into one of the grocery bags and pulled out the container of baby formula, the one she hadn't been able to afford on her own. The weight of it in her hands felt different now. It wasn't just formula anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. "What do you think, Sophie?" she asked, glancing in the rearview mirror at her daughter. "Should Mommy trust the nice biker man?" Sophie responded with a happy squeal, waving her rabbit in the air. Megan smiled, but worry crept back into her thoughts as she started the car. The engine made that concerning rattling sound again, another problem she couldn't afford to fix. She drove home carefully, making all the right turns through their modest neighborhood, past the laundromat, where she sometimes picked up extra shifts, and into the small apartment complex parking lot. That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Megan stayed up later than usual. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, sorting through bills by the dim light above the sink. The electric bill was past due, and rent was coming up soon. She'd picked up extra cleaning jobs, but it never seemed to be enough. The numbers blurred together as exhaustion settled over her like a heavy blanket. Morning came too quickly, announced by Sophie's hungry cries from the nursery. Megan stumbled out of bed, her body aching from too little sleep. She went through their morning routine mechanically: diaper change, warm bottle, gentle rocking. But when she reached for the formula container, her heart sank. Despite Jax's help the night before, there was barely enough for one more bottle. She leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Sophie drink her bottle, those big blue eyes staring up at her trustingly. The weight of being everything to this tiny person, mother, provider, protector, pressed down on her shoulders. She thought about her own mother's words the last time they'd spoken. "You're not ready to be a mother." The memory stung, but Sophie's warm weight in her arms told a different story. "Am I doing right by you, sweet girl?" Megan whispered, touching Sophie's soft cheek. The baby reached up with her tiny hand, grabbing her mother's finger. The simple gesture brought tears to Megan's eyes. She was trying so hard, but sometimes it felt like she was barely keeping her head above water. The empty formula container on the counter seemed to mock her efforts at independence. She thought about Jax's offer of help, about his gruff kindness. Pride had always kept her from accepting help before, but looking at Sophie's trusting face, she wondered if pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Megan stared at her phone as it buzzed on the kitchen counter, her mother's name flashing across the screen. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't spoken to her mother in weeks, and their last conversation hadn't gone well. Sophie was playing with blocks on the living room floor, happily babbling to herself. Taking a deep breath, Megan answered, "Hello." "Well, if it isn't my daughter finally picking up the phone." Her mother's sharp voice cut through the line. "I saw Betty at church yesterday. She told me she saw you at the supermarket, looking like you could barely afford groceries." Megan's cheeks burned. "Mom, I'm doing fine." "Fine? That's not what I heard. Still working those cleaning jobs? When are you going to get a real job, Megan? One with benefits and a future?" The familiar weight of disappointment settled on Megan's shoulders. She watched Sophie stack another block, her tiny face scrunched in concentration. "They are real jobs, Mom. I'm doing what I need to do for Sophie." "That child needs stability," her mother continued, her voice dripping with judgment. "If you'd just listened to me in the first place." "Don't." Megan's voice cracked. "Don't start with that again." "Well, someone has to say it. You're struggling, and it's your own fault. I raised you better than this, Megan Sullivan. Running around with no proper job, probably taking handouts from strangers." Megan's eyes stung with tears. Her mother's words hit too close to home, especially after Jax's help at the store. "I have to go," she managed to say. "Of course you do. You always run away from the truth." Her mother's sigh was heavy with disapproval. "Don't come asking me for help when things get worse." Megan ended the call, her hands shaking. She looked around her small apartment, at the worn furniture, the pile of bills on the counter, and her beautiful daughter playing innocently on the floor. The crushing weight of her situation pressed down on her chest. As if on cue, her car keys caught her eye, reminding her of another problem. The Honda had been making strange noises lately, and this morning it had barely started. She couldn't afford repairs right now, not with rent coming due. Her phone buzzed again, and she almost ignored it, thinking it was her mother calling back. But the number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Megan?" a gruff voice responded. "It's Jax, from the supermarket." She sat down hard in her kitchen chair. "How did you—" "I know a guy at the mechanic shop where you took your car last time," he explained. "He mentioned you were having trouble with it again." Megan closed her eyes. Of course, everyone knew about her struggles. "I'm handling it," she said firmly. "Look," Jax's voice softened slightly. "I'm good with cars. I could take a look at it for you. No charge. Family helps family, remember?" The word family made her throat tight. After her mother's call, it hit differently. She watched Sophie playing, thinking about how much she needed reliable transportation for work. She hesitated, pride warring with necessity. "Just let me help," Jax said simply. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon." Megan looked at her keys again, thought about the growing sound in her engine, and the cleaning job she couldn't afford to lose. She swallowed hard. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." Megan sat on a worn leather couch in the corner of the mechanic's shop, watching as Jax's large frame bent over her car's engine. The familiar smell of oil and metal filled the air, mixed with the soft whir of tools and distant radio music. Sophie was nestled in her arms, finally asleep after a long morning. "Hand me that wrench, would you?" Jax pointed to a toolbox nearby. His Hell's Angels jacket hung on a hook by the wall, replaced by a gray t-shirt stained with grease. Megan carefully laid Sophie down on the couch and brought him the tool. "How bad is it?" Your timing belt's shot, Jax said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. But that's not the only problem. Whoever worked on this last time didn't know what they were doing. She wrapped her arms around herself, anxiety creeping in. I can't afford major repairs right now. Didn't ask you to pay anything, did I? Jax's voice was gruff, but kind. He continued working, his movement steady and sure. You know I used to wear suits to work every day. Megan blinked in surprise. What? Hard to believe, right? He chuckled, the sound deep and rumbling. Had my own business, software company. Started it from scratch in my garage. Built it up over 10 years. His hands stilled on the engine. Had everything. Corner office, fancy car, beautiful wife, 2 kids. Megan shifted her weight, uncertain how to respond. This wasn't what she'd expected from the intimidating biker who'd helped her at the supermarket. Lost it all because I got greedy, he continued, reaching for another tool. Started making deals I shouldn't have. Cutting corners. Thought I was untouchable. He shook his head. Pride comes before the fall, right? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jax worked in silence for a moment. My wife left, took the kids. Business went under. Found myself sleeping in my car, wondering how I'd messed up so badly. What happened then? Megan asked softly. Met some guys from the club. They saw past what I'd become. Gave me a chance when nobody else would. He gestured to his jacket on the wall. Found a new family. New purpose. Jax straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes met Megan's, and she saw something there she hadn't noticed before. A deep well of pain, but also peace. That's why I help people when I can. Each time I do, it's like paying back a little bit of what I owe. Like maybe I can make up for some of the hurt I caused. Megan looked at this man, this former businessman turned biker, in a new light. The tough exterior seemed to soften, revealing someone who understood what it meant to struggle, to fail, to need help. Sophie stirred on the couch, making small sounds in her sleep. Jax glanced at her, his expression gentle. Sometimes the people who seem the least likely to understand are the ones who understand the most. The vulnerability in his voice caught Megan off guard. She'd been so quick to judge him based on his appearance, his lifestyle. Now, watching him return to working on her car with careful, skilled hands, she realized how wrong she'd been. Your timing belt's almost done, he said, his voice returning to its usual gruffness. Then we'll check the brakes. Should have you back on the road by tonight. Jax's rough hands stilled on the wrench as his eyes grew distant. Made all the wrong choices. Got greedy. Started cutting corners. Making deals I shouldn't have. He shook his head, a shadow crossing his weathered face. Lost everything. My company, my house, my family. Megan shifted on her feet, watching this imposing man transform before her eyes. The leather-clad biker who had seemed so intimidating in the grocery store now showed a vulnerability that touched her heart. My daughter would be about your age now, he said softly, turning back to the engine. Haven't seen her in 5 years. Sophie stirred on the couch, making tiny noises in her sleep. Megan glanced at her daughter, then back at Jax. Is that why you helped us at the store? Maybe. He tightened a bolt with careful precision. Or maybe I just know what it's like to need help and be too proud to ask for it. The radio played softly in the background, an old country song about redemption. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, catching the silver in Jax's beard. His hands, despite their size and strength, worked with surprising gentleness on her car's delicate parts. The Hells Angels, he continued. They took me in when I had nothing. Taught me to work with my hands again. Gave me purpose. He straightened up, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. Most people see the jacket and run the other way. But we're family. We look out for our own. Megan thought about her own family, her judgmental mother, the father who'd passed away too soon, Sophie's dad, who disappeared before she was born. Family isn't always what people expect it to be, is it? No, it sure isn't. Jack smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through his gruff exterior. He closed the hood with a solid thunk. Try starting her up. Megan slid into the driver's seat, said a silent prayer, and turned the key. The engine purred to life, running smoother than it had in months. Relief flooded through her as she realized one less thing would be keeping her up at night. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, climbing out of the car. "You don't have to." Jax retrieved his jacket from the hook, shrugging it on. "Just remember what I said. You're not alone anymore." Gathering Sophie in her arms, Megan felt tears pricking at her eyes. This man, whose society might judge based on his appearance alone, had shown her more kindness than anyone had in years. She secured Sophie in her car seat and rolled down the window. "Thank you again, Jax, for everything." He nodded, that same gentle smile on his face. "Drive safe." As Megan pulled out of the mechanic's shop, she caught a glimpse of Jax in her rearview mirror, the intimidating biker with a heart of gold, standing in the doorway like a guardian angel in leather. Her car hummed smoothly beneath her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. Megan's arms ached as she scrubbed the bathroom floor of her third client's house that day. Sweat trickled down her forehead, and her knees protested against the hard tile. The clock on the wall showed 4:30 p.m. She had exactly 45 minutes to finish before rushing to pick up Sophie from daycare. "Almost done," she whispered to herself, dunking the sponge back into the bucket of soapy water. The chemical smell made her eyes water, but she kept going. Every dollar counted. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. The daycare. Again. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep the exhaustion from her voice. "Ms. Sullivan, I hate to bring this up again, but we still haven't received this week's payment." Megan's stomach twisted. "I know. I'm so sorry. I get paid tomorrow. I promise I'll bring it first thing in the morning." She ended the call and sat back on her heels, closing her eyes for just a moment. The list of bills in her head seemed endless. Daycare, groceries, car payment, rent. Always the rent. An hour later, she carried a sleepy Sophie up the stairs to their small apartment. Her daughter's warm weight against her shoulder was both a comfort and a reminder of everything at stake. The day's worth of cleaning supplies bumped against her hip with each step. Inside, she settled Sophie with some blocks on the living room floor and started sorting through the day's mail. Bills, ads, more bills. And then a white envelope that made her heart skip a beat. Their landlord's return address stared back at her. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. The words, "Final Notice," jumped out in bold letters at the top of the page. Below that, in cold, precise language, "Payment of 3 months overdue rent, $12,400, required within 24 hours, or eviction proceedings will commence." The paper shook in her grip. 3 months. She'd been juggling partial payments, always promising to catch up. But now... Sophie babbled happily from her spot on the floor, stacking blocks into a wobbly tower. Megan watched her daughter, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She couldn't let Sophie see her cry. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The balance stared back at her. $342.17. Not even close to enough. She scrolled through her contacts. Old friends, distant relatives, anyone who might be able to help. But she already knew what their answers would be. They'd helped before, and she had nothing left to offer in return. The memory of her mother's voice from their last call echoed in her head. "You made your bed, Megan. Now you have to lie in it." Sophie's tower of blocks crashed to the floor with a clatter, and she giggled, already reaching to build it again. Megan watched her daughter's determined little face, her tiny hands grabbing each block with purpose. Such a simple joy, building something from nothing. Megan folded the eviction notice carefully and tucked it into her purse. She had 24 hours. 24 hours to figure something out, to find a way to keep a roof over her daughter's head. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, but she forced herself to stay calm. She'd figure something out. She had to. Moonlight filtered through the thin curtains of Megan's small apartment as she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills and receipts. The numbers on the papers blurred together as she squinted at them in the dim light of her phone's calculator. She'd been at this for hours, trying to make impossible math work. 200 for daycare, 300 for car payment, she mumbled, scribbling figures on a wrinkled envelope. And now the rent. Her voice trailed off as she stared at the final total. Sophie's cry pierced the quiet night. Megan's head snapped up, and she hurried to her daughter's room, her sock-covered feet padding quietly across the worn carpet. "Shh, baby. Mommy's here," she whispered, lifting Sophie from her crib. The baby's skin felt warm against her neck. "Oh, sweetie, you're burning up," Sophie whimpered, her little hands clutching at Megan's t-shirt. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Megan could see her daughter's flushed cheeks and runny nose. She grabbed the baby thermometer from the dresser and somehow managed to take Sophie's temperature while holding her. 101.2, Megan read aloud, her heart sinking. She couldn't afford to miss work tomorrow, but Sophie couldn't go to daycare with a fever either. Back in the kitchen, Megan paced with Sophie in her arms, gently bouncing her while checking the medicine cabinet. The children's Tylenol bottle was nearly empty. She measured out the last dose carefully, coaxing it into Sophie's mouth. "There we go. That should help you feel better," she murmured, though her own voice shook with worry. Hours ticked by slowly. Sophie dozed fitfully against Megan's shoulder, waking every so often with painful coughs or quiet whimpers. Megan's arms ached, but she kept walking, kept bouncing, kept humming soft lullabies. At 3 a.m., she found herself back at the kitchen table, Sophie finally sleeping, but still too warm against her chest. The bills seemed to mock her from their scattered positions on the table. She'd already cut out everything she could think of. No cable TV, no internet, except her phone plan, no new clothes for herself in months. Her eyes burned with exhaustion as she looked at the rent notice again. The words, "Final warning," jumped out at her, making her stomach clench. Sophie stirred against her, letting out a congested sigh in her sleep. "What am I going to do?" Megan whispered into her daughter's fine hair. The silence of the apartment offered no answers. Moving to the living room, Megan sank onto the worn couch, carefully adjusting Sophie so she could breathe easier. The weight of her daughter on her chest was both comforting and overwhelming. A reminder of everything she was responsible for, everything she couldn't afford to lose. Her eyelids grew heavier as Sophie's warmth seeped into her. The sound of her daughter's breathing, still slightly labored but steady, became a rhythm that pulled her toward sleep. She fought it, trying to focus on solutions, on ways to stretch her next paycheck impossibly thin. But exhaustion won out. Her last conscious thought was of the rent notice on the kitchen table, the numbers swimming in her vision as she finally drifted off, one hand protectively cradling Sophie's back as they both slept on the couch. The morning sun beat down on Megan's old sedan as she turned the key in the ignition for the third time. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. She slumped against the steering wheel, fighting back tears. Sophie babbled in her car seat, blissfully unaware of their situation. "Please, please, please," Megan whispered, trying one more time. The car made a grinding noise that sent chills down her spine, then fell silent. Her phone showed 8:45 a.m. She was already late for Mrs. Henderson's house-cleaning appointment. The screen of her phone felt cold against her ear as she dialed Mrs. Henderson's number. "I'm so sorry," Megan said, her voice wavering. "My car won't start, and I can't make it today." She winced at the sharp reply on the other end. "Well, this is very inconvenient, Megan. I have guests coming this afternoon. Mrs. Henderson's disapproval crackled through the speaker. I'll have to find someone more reliable. Please, I just need to get my car fixed. I can come tomorrow? No, thank you. I'll be finding another cleaning service. The line went dead. Megan's hands shook as she looked at her phone. That was $200 she desperately needed, gone in an instant. She glanced at Sophie in the rearview mirror. Her baby girl still had a slight fever from last night. Her cheeks flushed pink. The apartment complex's parking lot stretched out around them, empty, except for a few old cars. The morning was already getting hot, and sweat beaded on Megan's forehead. She had to do something, had to find some way to fix this. With trembling fingers, she scrolled through her contacts. Her thumb hovered over Mom for a long moment before she pressed it. The phone rang 4 times before her mother's familiar voice answered. Well, this is a surprise, her mother said, her tone already carrying a hint of judgment. Mom, Megan's voice caught. She swallowed hard. I need help. My car broke down again, and I just lost one of my cleaning jobs. Sophie's sick, and the rent is due, and I don't know what to do anymore. The silence on the other end stretched out for what felt like forever. Finally, her mother sighed. Megan, how many times have we been through this? You chose to keep that baby. You chose to do this on your own. Mom, please. No, you listen to me. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. I told you this would happen, didn't I? But you wouldn't listen. Hot tears spilled down Megan's cheeks. Sophie made a soft noise in the back seat, and Megan quickly wiped her eyes, not wanting her daughter to see her cry. I'm not asking for much, Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just a little help until you can what? Make another bad decision? Get yourself into more trouble? Her mother's voice hardened. I'm done enabling you, Megan. Figure it out yourself. The call ended with a click, leaving Megan alone with the sound of her ragged breathing and Sophie's gentle babbling. She stared at her phone, feeling more isolated than ever. The morning traffic hummed in the distance, people going about their normal lives while hers seemed to be falling apart, piece by piece. Sophie sneezed in the back seat, reminding Megan that she couldn't just sit there feeling sorry for herself. But for the first time since becoming a mother, she truly didn't know what her next move should be. The afternoon heat shimmered off the cracked sidewalk as Megan trudged back to her apartment. Sophie nestled against her chest in a baby carrier. Her feet ached from the walk, and sweat trickled down her back. The weight of the morning's disasters, the broken-down car, the lost cleaning job, her mother's cruel words, pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Well, if it isn't my favorite girls, a familiar gruff voice called out. Megan's head snapped up to see Jax's imposing figure leaning against his parked motorcycle. His leather vest gleamed in the sunlight, and despite the heat, he looked completely at ease. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Here she was, a mess, with her hair sticking to her forehead and probably looking as defeated as she felt. Hi, Jax, she managed, trying to sound more cheerful than she felt. Sophie perked up at the sight of him, reaching out with her tiny hands and babbling excitedly. Looks like the little one remembers me, Jax said, his stern face softening as he wiggled his fingers at Sophie. He turned his attention back to Megan, his expression growing concerned. You okay? You're looking a bit rough around the edges. Megan shifted Sophie's weight, avoiding his eyes. I'm fine, just... My car broke down again. Had to cancel a cleaning job. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. Again? Jax's eyebrows furrowed. Thought we fixed it up good last time. We did, it's just... Megan sighed, running a hand through her damp hair. Everything's falling apart at once, I guess. Jax stepped closer, his presence somehow both intimidating and comforting. Where's the car now? Back at my apartment complex, in the parking lot. She gestured vaguely down the street. Let me take a look at it. Jax offered, already pulling out his phone. "I've got my tools in the saddlebag, and if we need anything else, I can call in a favor at the shop." Megan hesitated, her pride warring with her desperate need for help. Sophie chose that moment to reach out and grab at Jax's beard, giggling when he playfully growled at her. "I can't pay you," Megan blurted out, her voice small. "I'm barely making rent as it is." Jax's eyes softened, though his voice remained gruff. "Did I mention anything about payment? Family helps family, remember?" There it was again, that word. Family. It hit something deep in Megan's chest, especially after her mother's rejection earlier that morning. She felt tears threatening to spill and blinked them back quickly. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "Listen here," Jax said, his voice firm but kind. "You're not a burden. You're a mother doing her best for her kid. That's something I respect." He adjusted his leather vest and added, "Now, are you going to let me look at that car, or do I have to stand here arguing with you in this heat all day?" A small laugh escaped Megan's lips, surprising even herself. "Okay," she nodded, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "It's this way." As they walked together, Sophie babbling happily between them, Megan felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the comfort of knowing someone had her back. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about not having to face everything alone. Jax's motorcycle rumbled to a stop in front of a small diner on the edge of town. The neon open sign flickered in the window, casting a warm glow across the nearly empty parking lot where several other motorcycles were lined up. Megan sat in her newly fixed car, Sophie sleeping peacefully in her car seat, and watched as a group of leather-clad figures moved about inside. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I don't know about this, Jax," she said through her rolled-down window. "Trust me," Jax said, his voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. "These are good people. Besides, Sophie needs to eat, and Mary makes the best mac and cheese in town." Megan glanced at her sleeping daughter and took a deep breath. After everything Jax had done for her, she owed him at least this much trust. She nodded and carefully lifted Sophie from her car seat. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The diner was warm and smelled of coffee and fried food. 5 men and 2 women, all wearing Hell's Angels jackets, similar to Jax's, looked up from their booth. Megan instinctively held Sophie closer. "Everyone, this is Megan and Sophie," Jax announced, his hand resting supportively on Megan's shoulder. "They're family now." A woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes stood up first. "I'm Mary," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "And this little angel needs some food in her belly." She reached for Sophie, who, to Megan's surprise, went to her willingly. One by one, the others introduced themselves. There was Big Mike, a giant of a man with a Santa Claus beard, who immediately offered to share his fries. Sarah, a younger woman with colorful tattoos covering her arms, pulled out a small stuffed bear from her bag for Sophie. Tom and Rick, twin brothers with matching gray beards, argued over who would buy Megan's dinner. "Sit down, honey," Mary said, settling Sophie into a high chair. "Nobody leaves my diner hungry." As the evening progressed, Megan found herself relaxing. She listened as they shared stories, not of wild rides or trouble, but of community fundraisers they'd organized, toys they'd collected for children's hospitals, and fellow riders they'd helped through tough times. "We all got our stories," Big Mike said, bouncing Sophie on his knee while she giggled. "Some of us made mistakes. Some of us got dealt bad hands. But here, we're just family." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Megan's hand. "When I lost my job and couldn't feed my kids, these people showed up with groceries. No questions asked." "That's what family does," Jax added quietly, and Megan caught the hint of pride in his voice. Looking around the table, Megan saw beyond the leather and tattoos. She saw Mary's maternal warmth as she refilled coffee cups, the gentleness in Big Mike's massive hands as he played with Sophie, the genuine concern in Sarah's eyes. These weren't the dangerous outlaws she'd expected. They were people who had found their own way to build a family, to create belonging out of brokenness. Sophie squealed with delight as Tom performed a silly peekaboo routine, and Megan felt something shift inside her. The walls she'd built around herself and Sophie began to crack, letting in the warmth of this unexpected community. Maybe family wasn't about perfect homes or conventional appearances. Maybe it was about people who showed up when you needed them most, who offered help without judgment, who made room at their table without hesitation. The diner had emptied out, leaving just Megan and Jax sitting in a worn leather booth. Sophie dozed peacefully in Mary's arms near the counter, the older woman humming softly as she rocked the baby. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed quietly, and the smell of coffee and pie hung in the air. Megan stared into her half-empty cup of coffee, her fingers tracing the rim. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The landlord gave me 24 hours to pay up, or we're out." Her shoulders slumped as she finally voiced the fear that had been eating away at her. Jax leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the table. Despite his intimidating appearance, his eyes held nothing but understanding. "Tell me what's going on," he said gently. "Everything's falling apart," Megan's voice cracked. "I'm behind on rent, Sophie's been sick, and I had to miss work. The cleaning jobs barely cover food and diapers." She wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. "I've tried so hard to do everything right, to give Sophie a good life, but I'm failing her." "Hey now." Jax's voice was firm but kind. "Look at me." Megan lifted her gaze to meet his. "That little girl over there?" He nodded toward Sophie. "She's healthy, loved, and safe. That's not failing." "But we might be homeless by tomorrow." Megan's voice trembled. "What kind of mother lets that happen?" "A human one," Jax replied. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I used to have it all. Successful business, beautiful house, family. Then I made some bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, lost everything." His fingers tapped against his coffee cup. "I thought my life was over, felt like I'd never recover from those mistakes." Megan watched as various emotions crossed his face. "What changed?" "I realized I wasn't alone," he said. "These people here." He gestured around the diner. "They showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most." "But I can't keep taking help," Megan protested. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet." "Why?" Jax challenged gently. "Who told you that asking for help makes you weak? Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you can't do it all alone." Tears welled up in Megan's eyes. "I'm so scared," she admitted. "Every day, I wake up terrified that I'm going to mess up so badly that Sophie will suffer for it, that I'll end up proving my mother right, that I'm not capable of being a good parent." Jax reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Listen to me, Megan. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone struggles. What matters is that you keep getting up, keep trying, and you don't have to do it alone anymore." "I don't know how to accept help," Megan confessed. "I've been on my own for so long." "Then let us teach you," Jax said softly. "You're not alone in this anymore. We've all been where you are, fighting battles that seem too big to win. But that's why we stick together." A ghost of a smile crossed Megan's face as she watched Sophie snuggle deeper into Mary's embrace. For the first time, in what felt like forever, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. "Thank you," she whispered. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the sprawling suburban home, where Megan was finishing up her cleaning work. Her hands moved methodically over the granite countertops, making them shine. The scent of lemon cleaner filled the air as she wiped down the last of the kitchen surfaces. Mrs. Henderson, her newest client, walked into the kitchen wearing an elegant business suit. "Megan, dear, the house looks absolutely wonderful." She peered around, inspecting the gleaming surfaces. "I don't think it's ever been this clean." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." Megan smiled, though exhaustion tugged at the corners of her eyes. She'd been up since 5 that morning, dropping Sophie off at the neighbor's, before heading to her first job of the day. This was her third house, and her back ached from hours of scrubbing and mopping. Mrs. Henderson opened her purse and pulled out some bills. "Here's your regular payment and—" She hesitated before adding several more bills. "This is a little extra. You've done such amazing work, and I heard you mention you were having a tough time." Megan's hands trembled as she counted the money, her regular fee plus $100 tip. "Mrs. Henderson, I can't accept this much." "Nonsense." Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. "Good work deserves good pay, and everyone needs help sometimes." Tears pricked at Megan's eyes as she carefully tucked the money into her wallet. With this extra amount, she was getting closer to having enough for the rent. She thought about Sophie, imagining her daughter's peaceful sleeping face, and felt a surge of determination. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means more than you know." On her drive home, Megan's mind raced with calculations. Between her savings, the regular payments from her other clients, and now this generous tip, she might just make it. The thought made her chest feel lighter than it had in weeks. She parked her old car outside her apartment building, gathering her cleaning supplies. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked parking lot, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. But as she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, her heart stopped. There, taped to her door, was a white piece of paper. The official letterhead made her stomach drop before she even read the words. With shaking hands, she pulled the notice from the door. "Eviction notice," it read in bold letters at the top. Megan's legs went weak, and she slumped against the wall. The paper trembled in her hands as she read through the legal jargon. The message was clear. She and Sophie needed to be out within 3 days. The hope that had bloomed in her chest just moments ago withered and died. The $100 tip that had seemed like such a blessing now felt like a cruel joke in the face of what she needed. She unlocked her door with numb fingers, stepping into the small apartment that had been home for the past 2 years. Sophie's stuffed animals were scattered across the floor. Her high chair still had Cheerios from breakfast, and the walls held photos of her daughter's first steps. This wasn't just an apartment. It was their home. And now, they were about to lose it all. Megan slid down the wall just inside her door, the eviction notice crumpling in her fist as the full weight of their situation crashed over her. Her breath came in short gasps as panic set in. Where would they go? What would happen to Sophie? The evening light faded outside her window, casting the apartment in shadows that matched the darkness settling over her heart. Megan's hands shook as she dialed Jax's number. She sat on the edge of her worn couch, the eviction notice crumpled in her lap. Sophie played quietly on the floor with her stuffed bunny, blissfully unaware of her mother's distress. "Hey there!" Jax's gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Jax?" Her voice cracked. I need help." The words felt like glass in her throat, sharp and painful to get out. "What's wrong?" His tone shifted immediately, concern evident. Megan took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "They're going to evict us." "I just got the notice. I have to pay everything I owe by tomorrow, or Sophie and I—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "How much?" Jax asked without hesitation. 3 months behind, almost $2,000. Megan's voice was barely a whisper. "I know it's too much to ask. I shouldn't have called—" "Stop right there," Jax interrupted. "You're family now, remember? Meet me at Mike's Diner in 30 minutes. Can you do that?" Megan glanced at Sophie. "Yes, I can get Mrs. Martinez next door to watch Sophie." "Good. Don't worry, we'll figure this out." 30 minutes later, Megan pushed open the door to Mike's Diner. The bell chimed above her head, and the smell of coffee and grilled onions filled the air. Jax sat in a corner booth, his leather jacket draped over the back of the seat. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. 3 other members of the Hells Angels sat with him. She recognized Tommy, a gray-haired man with kind eyes who had helped fix her car, and Marcus, whose arms were covered in colorful tattoos. The third was a woman named Sarah, who had Sophie's aged daughter. "Come sit," Jax called out, gesturing to the empty spot beside him. Megan slid into the booth, feeling small among these tough-looking bikers. Her eyes were red from crying, and she couldn't quite meet their gazes. "So, here's the deal," Jax began, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. "None of us has $2,000 lying around. But together?" He looked at his friends. "Together, we can make this work." Tommy pulled out his wallet. "I got $300 for my disability check." "I can put in $500, Marcus said. "Was saving it for a new paint job on my bike. But this is more important." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Megan's hand. "I've got some savings from my waitressing job. $400, it's yours." "And I've got the rest," Jax said firmly. "Between overtime at the shop and selling my old tools, I can cover it." Megan's vision blurred with tears. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Yeah, you can," Sarah said softly. "Because someday you'll help someone else who needs it. That's how family works." The others nodded in agreement. Megan looked at these people, these bikers who society often judged harshly, and saw nothing but kindness in their eyes. They were pulling out phones, making calls, figuring out how to get the money together by tomorrow's deadline. "We take care of our own," Jack said quietly beside her. "And you're one of us now." Megan's hands trembled around her coffee cup as she watched them work out the details. These virtual strangers were moving mountains to keep her and Sophie from ending up on the street. The lump in her throat made it impossible to speak, but her heart swelled with gratitude and something else: hope. Megan hesitated at the door of the Hells Angels clubhouse, her heart pounding against her ribs. The building looked rough from the outside, weathered wood and faded paint, but warm light spilled from its windows into the darkening evening. Sophie slept peacefully in her car seat, which felt heavy in Megan's tired arms. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Jax stood there, his massive frame filling the doorway. His usual stern expression softened when he saw her. "Come on in," he said, stepping aside. The inside of the clubhouse wasn't what Megan had expected. Instead of a dark, smoky den, she found herself in a well-lit room, filled with mismatched furniture and the smell of coffee. About 15 people were gathered there, men and women of various ages, most wearing leather jackets with the Hells Angels insignia. "Everyone," Jax announced, his voice commanding attention. "This is Megan and little Sophie." He gestured to them with a gentle pride that made Megan's eyes water. A woman with silver-streaked hair approached first. "I'm Martha," she said, smiling warmly. "Why don't you let me take the little one? There's a quiet room where she can sleep." Megan hesitated, but something in Martha's grandmother-like demeanor made her trust her. She carefully handed over Sophie's car seat, watching as Martha carried her precious cargo to a side room. "We've been busy," Jack said, leading Megan to a table covered with cash and checks. The guys pulled together what they could. Martha organized a bake sale at her church. Mike from the auto shop pitched in too. Said it's partial payback for all the times I've helped him out. Megan stared at the collection of money, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." A burly man with a salt and pepper beard spoke up from his corner. "Don't need to say anything, honey. We take care of our own here." "That's right," added a younger woman with bright red hair. "We might look rough around the edges, but we're family. All of us have needed help at some point." Jax began counting the money, his large hands surprisingly delicate with the bills. $2,150. he announced finally. "That covers the back rent and gives you a little cushion." Tears spilled down Megan's cheeks. She looked around the room at these people, these strangers who had become family, and felt something shift inside her. All her life, she thought family meant the people who shared your blood, the ones who were supposed to stand by you, but so often didn't. But here, in this unexpected place, she found what family really meant. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay—" "You don't," Jax interrupted gently. "That's what family means. We help each other because we can, not because we expect anything back." Martha returned from the side room. "Sophie's still sleeping like an angel," she reported, then pulled Megan into a warm hug. "Now, let's get this rent paid before that landlord of yours closes up for the day." As Jax helped her count out the money and put it in an envelope, Megan felt steady for the first time in months. These people, this unlikely family, had given her more than just money. They'd given her hope, strength, and a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The morning sun streamed through Megan's apartment windows, casting warm patches of light across the living room floor where Sophie played with her blocks. The room wasn't fancy, but it was clean and organized, a far cry from the chaos of just a few weeks ago. Bills and receipts lay neatly stacked on the coffee table, each one marked with payment dates and amounts. Megan sat cross-legged on the floor beside Sophie, sipping her morning coffee while reviewing her budget notebook. The numbers were finally starting to make sense, and for the first time in months, she could see a path forward. She'd managed to pick up 2 more regular cleaning clients through Martha's connections, and the extra income was slowly but surely chipping away at her debts. "Look at you, big girl!" Megan exclaimed as Sophie successfully stacked 3 blocks. Her daughter's giggle filled the room, a sound that seemed more frequent these days. Perhaps Sophie could sense the lighter atmosphere in their home, the absence of that suffocating tension that had surrounded them before. The clock on the wall showed 9:30 a.m. Megan had an hour before her first cleaning job of the day. Mrs. Peterson, one of her new clients, had specifically requested her services after hearing about her attention to detail from Martha. The thought made her smile. Word of mouth was bringing her more work than all her previous desperate searches combined. A familiar rumble of a motorcycle engine drew her attention to the window. Jax's bike pulled into the parking lot, its chrome gleaming in the morning light. He'd been checking in regularly, though less frequently now that things were stabilizing. Megan appreciated that he knew when to step back, letting her regain her independence while still remaining a steady presence. "Uncle Jax!" Sophie squealed, abandoning her blocks and toddling to the window. The nickname had stuck after Martha had used it once, and now Sophie wouldn't call him anything else. Megan opened the door before he could knock, greeting him with a genuine smile. Jax's imposing figure filled the doorframe, but his eyes were gentle as he scooped up Sophie, who had attached herself to his leg. "Place is looking good," he noted, glancing around the apartment. His eyes landed on the organized bills and budget notebook. "You've been busy." "It's getting better," Megan replied, returning to her spot on the floor. "I'm actually ahead on this month's rent, and I've started a small emergency fund." Pride crept into her voice. Not the stubborn pride that had once kept her from accepting help, but a healthier pride born of genuine achievement. Jax settled into the armchair, still holding Sophie. "Martha says you're becoming her favorite topic of conversation at the diner. Says you're the most reliable cleaner she's ever recommended." Megan felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "It's not much, but it's honest work. And it's flexible enough that I can still be there for Sophie." She paused, looking at him thoughtfully. "I wouldn't have any of this without you, Jax." He shifted in his chair, and Megan recognized his familiar discomfort with gratitude. "You know," he said slowly, "helping you, it's given me something too." He bounced Sophie on his knee, making her giggle. "After everything I lost, I didn't think I'd ever feel like I had a purpose again. But seeing you get back on your feet, watching this little one grow. He trailed off, his gruff voice softening. It reminds me that maybe I'm not as lost as I thought I was. Megan nodded, understanding perfectly. Sometimes the path to finding yourself led through helping others find their way first. The morning sun streamed through Megan's apartment windows, casting warm patches of light across the living room floor where Sophie played with her blocks. The room wasn't fancy, but it was clean and organized, a far cry from the chaos of just a few weeks ago. Bills and receipts lay neatly stacked on the coffee table, each one marked with payment dates and amounts. Megan sat cross-legged on the floor beside Sophie, sipping her morning coffee while reviewing her budget notebook. The numbers were finally starting to make sense, and for the first time in months, she could see a path forward. She'd managed to pick up 2 more regular cleaning clients through word of mouth, and the extra income was slowly but surely chipping away at her debts. "Look at you, big girl!" Megan exclaimed as Sophie successfully stacked 3 blocks. Her daughter's giggle filled the room, a sound that made her heart swell with love and determination. Sophie was growing so fast. Soon, she'd be walking, talking, and before Megan knew it, starting school. School. The thought made Megan pause. She pulled her notebook closer and flipped to a fresh page, writing Sophie's future at the top in neat letters. Below it, she began listing things she wanted for her daughter: good education, stable home, maybe even some dance classes or sports when she got older. Simple dreams, perhaps, but they felt possible now. She glanced around their small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was home. Maybe in a year or two, with careful saving, they could move to a slightly bigger place, one with a little yard where Sophie could play. The thought no longer felt like an impossible fantasy. "We're going to be okay, sweetie," Megan whispered, reaching out to stroke Sophie's soft hair. Her daughter looked up at her with those big blue eyes, completely trusting and full of joy. More than okay. The changes in their lives went beyond just financial stability. The warmth of community support had transformed their world. Every Saturday, they had dinner with Jax and some of his friends at the local diner. Sophie had honorary uncles and aunts now, rough around the edges perhaps, but with hearts of gold. The isolation that had once threatened to overwhelm Megan had dissolved into a network of caring faces and helping hands. Megan started a new list titled 5-Year Plan. Her hand moved across the page with purpose as she wrote down goals: emergency savings, better apartment, maybe even some classes at the community college. She'd always been good with numbers and organization, skills that had served her well in her cleaning business. Perhaps she could build on that. Sophie crawled into her lap, disrupting her planning session with demands for attention. Megan set aside her notebook and hugged her daughter close, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her hair. "You know what, Sophie? Mommy's going to make sure you have everything you need. We're going to have a good life." The phone rang, interrupting their moment. Megan reached for it, expecting to see Jax's number, or maybe one of her regular clients. Instead, she didn't recognize the number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Is this Megan Sullivan?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "Yes, this is she," Megan replied, adjusting Sophie on her lap. "I'm calling from Bright House Corporate Services. We've heard wonderful things about your cleaning work from the Hendersons. We're actually looking for someone to manage our full-time cleaning staff, and Mrs. Henderson suggested you might be perfect for the position." The phone trembled in Megan's hands as she accepted the position. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity," she said, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside her. The cleaning company supervisor on the other end explained that they needed someone reliable for their corporate accounts, and Megan's reputation for attention to detail had caught their attention. After hanging up, Megan sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the contract they'd emailed her. Full-time hours, health benefits, and a steady paycheck that would cover their needs with a little left over for savings. It felt surreal after months of piecing together part-time work and stretching every dollar until it screamed. Sophie crawled around the kitchen floor, babbling happily to herself as she explored. Megan watched her daughter, remembering all those nights she'd stayed awake, wondering how she'd provide for her little girl. Now, looking at the contract, she felt something shift inside her, a weight lifting that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. The next morning, Megan dressed in her new uniform, a neat navy blue shirt with the company logo, and clean black pants. She'd ironed everything the night before, wanting to look professional for her first day. Her neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, had agreed to watch Sophie during her shift. "You look different," Mrs. Johnson commented when Megan dropped Sophie off. "More confident." Megan smiled, realizing it was true. She stood straighter, held her head higher. The cleaning supplies in her car were no longer a reminder of struggle, but tools of her trade. She wasn't just scraping by anymore. She was building something. The office building where she started her first assignment sparkled with glass and chrome. Her supervisor showed her around, introducing her to the other members of the cleaning team. They were friendly, professional, and treated her like she belonged there. As she worked through her first day, Megan found herself enjoying the rhythm of it, the systematic way she moved from office to office, the satisfaction of seeing spaces transform under her care. It wasn't just cleaning, it was creating order from chaos, something she understood well. During her lunch break, she called to check on Sophie. Hearing her daughter's happy babbling through the phone, Megan felt tears prick at her eyes. Not from sadness or worry this time, but from pride. She was doing this. Really doing this. When her shift ended, Megan picked up Sophie and drove them home. She'd stopped at the store on the way and bought a small cake. Nothing fancy, just a simple chocolate one with white frosting. She set Sophie in her high chair and cut 2 small pieces, one for each of them. "Look at us now, baby girl," Megan said softly, watching Sophie smear frosting across her face. The evening sun filled their kitchen with golden light, making everything look warm and hopeful. Her uniform hung neatly on the back of a chair, ready for tomorrow. Her next paycheck was already scheduled, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel that gnawing fear in her stomach about how they'd make it through the month. Sophie giggled, reaching for another bite of cake, and Megan felt her heart swell. This was what it felt like to stand on solid ground, to know that tomorrow would be okay, and the day after that too. She thought about how far they'd come, from that day in the supermarket when she couldn't afford diapers, to now, sitting in their kitchen, celebrating her first day as a full-time employee. The evening sun cast long shadows across Jax's workshop as he wiped his hands on a red shop rag. Megan sat on an old wooden stool nearby, Sophie sleeping peacefully in her car seat. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal filled the air, a scent that had become oddly comforting to Megan over the past few months. "You know," Jax began, his voice softer than usual, "I used to wear suits to work." He let out a small chuckle, gesturing at his oil-stained jeans and leather vest. "Had my own business consulting firm. Nice house in the suburbs. White picket fence, the whole deal." Megan watched him as he moved around the workshop, straightening tools with careful precision. His large hands, now rough from years of mechanical work, handled each wrench and socket with surprising gentleness. "What happened?" she asked quietly, knowing the weight such questions could carry. Jax leaned against his workbench, crossing his arms. "Got greedy. Started making deals I shouldn't have. Cutting corners I knew better than to cut." He shook his head, his long beard catching the dying sunlight. "Lost everything in less than a year. My wife left, took the kids. The business went under. Even lost my house." The workshop fell silent, except for Sophie's soft breathing and the distant sound of traffic. Megan waited, sensing there was more to the story. "Found myself at rock bottom," Jax continued, his eyes distant. "Drinking too much, feeling sorry for myself. Then one day, this guy pulls up next to me at a red light. He's on this beautiful Harley, wearing his colors proud. We got to talking at the next light, and he invited me to a barbecue. A small smile crept across his weathered face. These guys, the ones everyone's scared of, they took me in. No questions asked. Taught me how to work on bikes, gave me purpose again. He gestured around the workshop. Helped me build all this. Megan looked at the space with new eyes, seeing beyond the tools and parts to the sanctuary it represented. They became your family, she said softly. Yeah, Jax nodded. But for a long time, I still felt like I needed to make up for my past mistakes. Kept thinking about my kids, wondering if they'd ever forgive me. He walked over to Sophie's car seat, gently adjusting the blanket that had slipped off her tiny feet. Then you came along, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Standing there in that supermarket, trying so hard to do right by your little one, reminded me of myself before everything went wrong. Except you were fighting to build something, not watching it fall apart. Megan felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as Jax turned to face her. Helping you, he said, clearing his throat. It's given me something I've been looking for since I lost everything. A chance to make things right, even if it's not with my own family. Every time I see you and Sophie doing better, it feels like maybe I'm not such a lost cause after all. The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Megan's heart. She saw him clearly now, not just as the intimidating biker who'd helped her in the supermarket, but as someone who'd found his way back from darkness, someone who understood what it meant to need a second chance. The workshop had grown quiet as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Megan watched as Sophie played contentedly with a small stuffed bear that one of the Hells Angels had given her. The bear wore a tiny leather vest, making her smile every time she saw it. I never thought I'd be friends with a Hells Angel, Megan said, breaking the comfortable silence. Let alone have one save my life. Jax's weathered face creased into a smile. And I never thought helping someone at a grocery store would change my life so much. He pulled up another stool and sat down, his large frame making the workshop stool look almost comically small. You know, before I met you, I was just going through the motions, trying to make up for my past, but not really feeling like I was getting anywhere. Megan nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. I was just surviving, not living. Every day felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. She reached down to stroke Sophie's soft hair. I was so scared of asking for help, of letting anyone see how much I was struggling. Pride's a funny thing, Jax said, his voice gruff but gentle. Sometimes it keeps us standing, and sometimes it keeps us from reaching out when we need it most. He absently fiddled with a wrench on the workbench. Meeting you, helping you. It reminded me that everyone deserves a second chance. Even me. Megan felt tears prick at her eyes. You've given me so much more than help with groceries or fixing my car. You've shown me what real family looks like. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I used to think I had to do everything alone, that asking for help meant I was failing Sophie somehow. And now, Jax asked, his eyes kind beneath his tough exterior. Now I know that being strong sometimes means letting others in. Megan smiled, watching Sophie yawn and cuddle her bear closer. The way you and your friends rallied around us when I was about to lose the apartment. I've never experienced anything like that before. Jax nodded, his expression softening. That's what family does. Blood or not, we take care of our own. He looked around the workshop, at the tools hanging neatly on the walls and the motorcycles waiting to be fixed. This life I have now, it's not what I planned. But helping you, being there for you and Sophie, it's given me something I lost a long time ago. What's that? Megan asked. Purpose, he said simply. A reason to keep going, to keep trying to be better. Megan understood completely. Her own life had transformed in ways she never expected. Her new job was going well, and for the first time in years, she wasn't constantly worried about making ends meet. But more than that, she had found a community, a support system, that didn't judge her for her struggles. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose," she said, watching as Sophie finally drifted off to sleep, still clutching her biker bear. "Or the ones that choose us." The sun had nearly set now, casting long shadows across the workshop floor. Through the open garage door, she could see the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Megan felt truly hopeful about the future. Not just surviving, but actually living, surrounded by people who cared about her and Sophie. Megan sat cross-legged on the living room floor, watching Sophie stack colorful blocks with determined concentration. The afternoon sun filtered through their small apartment window, casting a warm glow that made Sophie's blonde curls shine like spun gold. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains, the same curtains she'd almost had to leave behind just weeks ago. "Blue one, Mama!" Sophie declared, holding up a block. Her tiny fingers gripped it tightly as she placed it carefully on top of her growing tower. "That's right, sweetie. Blue, just like your eyes," Megan said, her heart swelling with love. She reached out to smooth Sophie's wild curls, remembering the countless nights she'd spent worrying about their future, wondering if she'd ever be able to give her daughter the life she deserved. The apartment felt different now. Where there had once been a heavy cloud of anxiety hanging over every corner, there was now a sense of peace. The stack of bills on the kitchen counter no longer seemed like an insurmountable mountain. Her new job provided steady income, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe easier. Sophie knocked over her block tower with a delighted giggle, and the sound echoed through the room like music. Megan remembered a time not so long ago when even Sophie's laughter had been tinged with her own worry, when every moment of joy had been shadowed by fear of what tomorrow might bring. "Again, Mama!" Sophie demanded, already gathering the blocks for another attempt. "Of course, baby," Megan replied, helping her daughter collect the scattered pieces. Her hands brushed against the soft carpet, the same carpet she'd once feared they'd have to leave behind. Now it felt like solid ground beneath them, a foundation they could build upon. The teddy bear with its tiny leather vest sat watching from the couch, a constant reminder of the unlikely family they'd found. Megan picked it up, running her fingers over the miniature patches that matched Jax's real vest. Who would have thought that a gruff biker with a heart of gold would become their guardian angel? Sophie abandoned her blocks and toddled over, reaching for the bear. "Bear!" she exclaimed, hugging it close to her chest. "That's right, sweetie. Our special bear." Megan pulled Sophie into her lap, breathing in the sweet baby shampoo scent of her hair. "You know what, Sophie? We've come so far, you and me. Remember when Mama used to be scared all the time?" Sophie looked up at her with those innocent blue eyes, too young to truly understand, but somehow sensing the emotion in her mother's voice. "But we're stronger now," Megan continued, rocking Sophie gently. "We have people who care about us. Real family, not just the kind you're born with, but the kind you find along the way." The setting sun painted their small living room in shades of orange and pink. Sophie's eyelids began to droop, the day's excitement finally catching up with her. Megan stood, cradling her daughter close as she carried her to the bedroom they shared. As she laid Sophie in her crib, the little girl clutched her leather-vested bear tightly. Megan tucked the blanket around them both, her heart full of gratitude for how far they'd come. The room was peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of Sophie's steady breathing and the distant hum of city life outside their window. "We're going to be okay," Megan whispered, gently stroking Sophie's cheek as she drifted off to sleep. The rumble of a motorcycle engine drew Megan's attention to the window. She recognized the familiar sound, Jax's Harley. Sophie, who had been playing with her blocks, perked up at the noise too. The little girl had grown used to their unexpected visitor over the past few weeks. "Look who's here, Sophie," Megan said, watching through the window as Jax parked his bike. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. A few minutes later, there was a gentle knock at the door. When Megan opened it, Jack stood there, his leather jacket worn but clean, his beard neatly trimmed. Despite his intimidating appearance, his eyes were warm and kind. "Thought I'd stop by and see how my girls are doing," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. Sophie toddled over to him, arms raised in a silent request to be picked up. Without hesitation, Jax scooped her up, and she immediately reached for his beard, giggling as she always did. "We're doing better," Megan said, moving to the kitchen to put on some coffee. "The new job is working out great. My supervisor even mentioned a possible promotion in a few months." Jax settled into their worn but comfortable couch, still holding Sophie. "That's real good to hear, Megan." "Real good." The coffee maker gurgled in the background as Megan joined them in the living room. She watched as Sophie showed Jax her block tower, the big man listening intently to her baby babble, as if she was telling him the most important story in the world. "You know," Jax said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "seeing you two doing better, it means a lot to me." He paused, adjusting Sophie on his knee. "When I lost my family, I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd never have anything like that again." Megan sat quietly, knowing how rarely Jax opened up about his past. "But helping you, and Sophie," he continued, "it showed me that family isn't always what we expect it to be. Sometimes it finds us when we least expect it." Sophie had dozed off against his chest, her small hand still clutching one of her blocks. Jax carefully shifted her into a more comfortable position. "I want you to know something, Megan," he said, his eyes serious. "No matter what happens, you'll always have me as family. Both of you will. The guys at the club, too. They all consider you one of our own now." Megan felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. "Jax, I don't know what to say. You've done so much for us already." He shook his head. "That's what family does. We look out for each other. No conditions, no expectations. Just love and support." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound being Sophie's soft breathing and the distant hum of city traffic. Megan got up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The setting sun painted the buildings in shades of gold and pink, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. She thought about how life had changed since that day in the supermarket when she couldn't afford diapers. How an intimidating man in a leather jacket had turned out to be the guardian angel she never knew she needed. How his rough exterior had hidden such a gentle, caring soul. As she stood there, watching the city lights begin to twinkle on, Megan felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this unexpected family she'd found. This mismatched, unconventional group of people who had opened their hearts to her and Sophie when they needed it most. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow through the apartment window. Megan sat in her favorite armchair, holding Sophie close in her lap. The little girl was peaceful, her tiny fingers playing with a loose thread on her mother's sweater. Their apartment wasn't fancy, but it was home. The walls that had once felt like they were closing in now held pictures of happy moments. Sophie's first steps, a group photo with Jax and his friends at the clubhouse, and snapshots of their growing extended family. Each image told a story of how far they'd come. Megan stroked Sophie's soft blonde hair, remembering those desperate days at the supermarket when she couldn't afford diapers. The memory no longer stung like it used to. Instead, it reminded her of the unexpected turn their life had taken when a gruff man in a leather jacket stepped forward to help. Sophie yawned and snuggled closer, her warm weight a comfort against Megan's chest. The trust in her daughter's eyes made every struggle worth it. Gone was the constant worry that had once creased Megan's forehead, replaced by laugh lines that came from genuine joy. The sunset's rays caught the crystal wind chime hanging in the window, a gift from one of the Hell's Angels' wives. It sent rainbow patterns dancing across the walls, making Sophie point and giggle. The sound of her daughter's laughter, once rare during their hardest times, now filled their home regularly. Megan thought about the community that had embraced them. The tough-looking bikers who showed up with groceries when times were tight. The women who watched Sophie when Megan needed to work late. Jax, who had become like a protective older brother, always checking in and making sure they were okay. Their small apartment had become a gathering place for this unlikely family. Just last weekend, they'd hosted a birthday party for Sophie. The sight of burly men in leather jackets singing "Happy Birthday" while Sophie smeared cake on her face was something Megan would never forget. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, its golden light growing softer. Sophie's eyelids grew heavy as she watched the changing colors in the sky. Her little hand reached up to touch Megan's cheek, a gesture so full of love it made Megan's heart swell. Looking around their home, Megan saw signs of their new life everywhere. The fixed car that ran reliably, thanks to Jax's mechanical skills. The steady paycheck from her new job that meant they could afford small luxuries now and then. The phone that rarely stopped buzzing with messages from people who genuinely cared about their welfare. As the last rays of sunlight painted the clouds in deep purple and gold, Megan felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. And it all started with one act of kindness from a stranger who refused to let them remain strangers. Sophie dozed off in her arms, her peaceful breathing a reminder of all they had to be thankful for. Megan hugged her daughter closer, watching as the sun slowly disappeared behind the horizon. In the growing dusk, she whispered softly, "Thank you for showing us what family really is." I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.